One of the first things you'll notice when using React is its similarity to the DOM. You've probably noticed that the function for creating a new element has the same name in both DOM and React. In DOM you call create element on the document object, in React you call it on the React object. The similarities are much deeper though, and this explains some of the things we've seen in the code we wrote so far. For example, we use class name instead of class, which we normally use in HTML as an attribute, to give an element its class. If you wanted to use inline CSS, we could use a style prop, but the CSS properties would have to be camel-cased instead of separated by a dash. Let's try it. Let's go back to code and add a background color to our header. If we switch to the browser and refresh, you'll see the style was applied. This is because React follows the same naming convention as the DOM when it comes to properties. It doesn't follow the naming convention used by HTML attributes. In DOM, we don't have a class property, instead we have class name. To check that this is indeed the case, I'll create a DOM element in the console. Let's see what properties it exposes. Notice class name, ID, and many others. Since React is trying to match the DOM API, the React props will be called the same. For example, a label element has a property called HTML4, which is mapped to the forHTML attribute. Thus, the React label element will also have an HTML4 prop to refer to the for attribute. Each DOM element also has a style property, which contains all the element's currently applied styles. Again, you can see there are many properties listed. In fact, these are all the properties for which CSS styles can be applied. But unlike CSS, the properties on the style object are camel-cased. For example, background color is written in a single word with a capital C, not in two words separated by a dash like in CSS. Therefore, when you want to apply styles in React, we'll have access to the same properties as in the DOM API. You can see that in our React example, we also use class name to refer to an element's class, and we use an object for style, just like the style object we can find in the DOM API. We also use camel case to refer to each element's style property, again following the DOM API. Not all DOM properties are defined for React elements though. React only defines the properties associated with HTML attributes. That's why there's a property source for image elements, but you won't find a client height property on React elements, even if that property is defined on DOM elements, because it doesn't refer to an HTML attribute. There are also other properties that map to different React features. You may remember that we used the text content property in the DOM example to set an element's text. React doesn't define a text content property, but you can add text directly as a child of React elements, and doing so will behave similarly to using the DOM element's text content property. Alright, we got used to creating React elements, so we can now continue with the implementation, but first I want to do some cleanup by removing this style property here, because we don't need the header to be blue. In the next video, we'll go a bit further and start creating the list of songs.